Everyone has that one childhood injury they'll never forget. The kind that started with a "this is a great idea" moment and ended with tears, stitches, or a trip to the ER. Today, we're diving into 9 real Reddit stories from people who learned the hard way that childhood curiosity can come with painful consequences. From ridiculous dares gone wrong to terrifying near-death experiences, these are the kinds of stories that leave a scar, literally and figuratively. And to start things off, imagine this. 2 best friends fighting over who gets to be your number one by using your arms as the rope. Sounds painful? Trust me, it gets worse. If you love insane true stories from Reddit, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Now, let's jump into the first brutal injury. Story number 1. The tug-of-war that broke my arm. Narrated by Evan. When I was 6, I had 2 best friends, Jake and Tommy. The problem? They both wanted to be my best friend. Instead of just, accepting that we could all be friends, they decided there was only one way to settle it: a competition. And not just any competition. They came up with the brilliant idea of playing a game of tug-of-war, with me as the rope. At first, I laughed it off, thinking it was just a joke. But before I knew it, they each grabbed one of my arms and started pulling. Hard. Back and forth, yanking me like a human wishbone. I yelled at them to stop, but they were too caught up in their ridiculous battle to listen. Then, there was a sharp, sickening pop. The pain hit instantly, a blinding, searing pain that shot up my left arm and straight into my brain. I screamed, but my friends let go too late. I collapsed to the ground, cradling my arm as hot tears ran down my face. Jake and Tommy freaked out. They started blaming each other, panicking, apologizing profusely. But that didn't help the fact that I was lying on the pavement, my arm bent in a way it definitely should not have been. The worst part? My parents didn't believe me at first. They thought I was just being dramatic, saying, "Oh, you probably just twisted it." So for the first couple of hours, I sat there in pain, waiting for it to magically get better. It wasn't until my arm started swelling up badly that they finally realized something was seriously wrong and rushed me to the hospital. The doctor confirmed it. I had fractured my ulna. Got myself a nice, very stylish, purple cast out of it. And guess what? The friend who pulled the hardest, the one who actually broke my arm, is still my best friend to this day. But not every childhood injury is this lighthearted. Some accidents are far worse and nearly fatal. Story number 2. The boy who fell straight onto a knife. Narrated by Jason. When I was 11, I thought I was invincible. Like most kids, I loved climbing trees, especially the giant oak in the park near my house. One afternoon, I spotted an old rope dangling from a branch. It looked like it had once belonged to a tree fort, and in my brilliant 11-year-old mind, I figured I could cut it down and use it for something cool. So, I brought my pocket knife and started climbing. It wasn't my first time scaling this tree, and I felt confident, until I wasn't. Just as I reached for the rope, my foot slipped. Everything happened too fast. The wind roared in my ears, my stomach lurched, and the next thing I knew, I hit the ground. Hard. For a second, I just lay there, too stunned to move. Then, white-hot pain shot through my leg. I remember looking down and seeing something shiny sticking out of my jeans, then the dark stain spreading fast. I don't remember much after that. Just flashes, someone yelling my name, the sky spinning above me, a hand grabbing my shoulder, shaking me. Voices, urgent, panicked, far away. Then sirens. When I woke up in the hospital, my mom was sitting beside me, her face pale. The doctor said I had severed a vein and needed 3 blood transfusions. They also said if I had lost any more blood before getting help, I might not have made it. I still have the scar. I still have the knife. But I have never climbed a tree with a knife again. But sometimes, a fall doesn't just leave a scar. It leaves you unable to walk for months. Story number 3. The kick that left me in a cast for 6 months. When I was 8 years old, my friends and I played soccer almost every day after school. We weren't exactly the most coordinated kids, but we had fun. Until one day, my terrible aim turned a casual game into a 6-month nightmare. It started when one of my friends accidentally kicked our ball onto the basketball court. No big deal, right? I ran over, spotted the ball near one of the metal posts, and figured I'd just kick it back onto the field. I swung my leg as hard as I could, and completely missed the ball. Instead, my foot slammed straight into the solid metal post. At first, there was just shock, like my brain hadn't fully processed what happened. Then, about 2 seconds later, a wave of pain crashed through my body. It felt like my foot had exploded from the inside out. I crumpled onto the ground, clutching my leg, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. My friends surrounded me, asking if I was okay, but I couldn't even speak. Someone ran to get a teacher, and before I knew it, I was sitting in the nurse's office, trying not to cry in front of my classmates. By the time my parents rushed me to the ER, my foot had swollen to twice its size. X-rays showed that I had 2 fractures, one near my toes and another closer to my ankle. The doctor said I'd need a cast for at least 6 months, followed by physical therapy to regain strength. For half a year, I hobbled around on crutches, wishing I had just picked up the ball with my hands instead. To this day, I can still feel a slight ache in my foot whenever the weather gets cold. A permanent reminder that sometimes a simple mistake can cost you months of recovery. But some injuries don't just heal with time. Some leave scars that last a lifetime. Story number 4. The shopping cart ride that ended in stitches. Narrated by Olivia. When I was 5 or 6 years old, my friends and I thought we had discovered the greatest game ever, shopping cart racing. The rules were simple. One kid sits inside, another pushes as fast as they can, and everyone else watches and cheers like it's the Indy 500. It was perfectly safe until it wasn't. That day, my best friend Emily climbed into the cart while I took the job of pushing. We zoomed through the empty parking lot, laughing like maniacs. I remember feeling invincible, like we were flying. Then, out of nowhere, the cart hit a rock. 1 second, Emily was in the cart, and the next, she was launched into the air. I barely had time to react before she slammed onto the pavement. Head first. Everything went silent for a moment. Then she started screaming. I ran to her side and saw blood pooling on the ground beneath her head. That's when I really started to panic. An adult rushed over, took one look, and immediately called 911. By the time we got to the ER, my stomach was twisted in knots. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Instead of regular stitches, the doctor pulled out a staple gun. I watched in horror as they stapled my best friend's head shut, each click echoing in my ears. Emily screamed louder than I'd ever heard before, and I just stood there, feeling absolutely useless. She ended up with several metal staples in her scalp, a bandage wrapped around her head like a war hero, and a strict, no roughhousing rule from her parents. As for me, I never looked at a shopping cart the same way again. But not all injuries come from accidents. Sometimes, it's pure curiosity that gets you into trouble. Story number 5. The blanket cape disaster. A painful crash landing. When I was 5 years old, I was absolutely convinced I could fly. Not like actual flying, of course, just a little bit of floating if I had the right equipment. And in my 5-year-old logic, the solution was simple: a blanket cape. My sister and I were jumping back and forth between our beds when inspiration struck. If I timed my jump just right and spread the blanket wide enough, I would glide through the air like Superman. So, I climbed onto my bed, wrapped the blanket around my shoulders, and announced, "I'm gonna fly." I took a deep breath and jumped. For a brief, glorious second, I truly believed I was soaring. Then, reality hit. Hard. I miscalculated my landing completely. Instead of touching down gracefully, I crashed straight onto my sister's rock collection, which was conveniently spread out under the bed. At first, I just lay there stunned. Then I looked down. My heel was split open, blood pouring out, and tiny shards of crystal embedded in my foot. Strangely, I didn't feel any pain. I limped out of the room to find my mom, leaving bloody footprints behind me. She freaked out. At the ER, the doctor told us I had severed some nerves, which explained why I couldn't feel anything. They cleaned out the shards, stitched me up, and sent me home with a giant bandage and a lesson I'd never forget. Now, years later, I still have the scar on my heel. It's faded, but every time I see it, I remember one thing. I am not Superman, but at least I could still walk. Some kids aren't so lucky after their childhood accidents. Story number 6. Slammed the brakes to avoid a snake and nearly broke my neck. Narrated by Harold. I was 10 years old when I learned that sometimes trying to avoid danger only leads you straight into it. It was a hot summer afternoon, and I was riding my bike through my neighborhood, speeding down the road like I was competing in the Tour de France. The wind in my face, the feeling of freedom, it was perfect, until I saw it. A snake, right in my path. Now, I don't know if it was venomous or not, and to be honest, I didn't really care. My brain screamed snake equals death, and I reacted instantly. I grabbed the front brake with all my strength. Big mistake. Instead of coming to a smooth stop, my front wheel locked up, and the next thing I knew, I was flying over the handlebars like a rag doll. Time slowed down as I soared through the air, arms flailing, and for a brief second, I thought, well, this is gonna suck. And oh boy, did it. I hit the ground hard, skidding at least 15 feet on the pavement. My knee took the worst of it. It twisted at a weird angle, and pain shot through my entire leg. When I finally stopped sliding, I looked back to assess the damage. My knee was dislocated, my leg bent in a way it definitely shouldn't have been, and my elbows were shredded from the asphalt. Blood was pooling around me, and the worst part? The damn snake was just chilling there, completely unfazed. A neighbor saw the whole thing and rushed over, helping me limp back home while I tried not to cry like a baby. My mom took one look at my knee and immediately dragged me to the ER. Turns out, I narrowly avoided a serious fracture, but I still had to wear a brace for weeks. And the lesson I took from all of this, maybe next time, just run over the damn snake. But not all accidents happen outdoors. Sometimes, the real danger is right inside your own home. Story number 7. The slip that ended in a 6-inch splinter. Narrated by Emma. When I was 7 years old, I learned 2 things. 1. Running in the house is a bad idea. 2. Old wooden floors are evil. It all started because of one simple thing, pure excitement. My dad had just told me we were going to Sizzler for dinner. Now, I don't know why a 7-year-old version of me thought Sizzler was the greatest place on earth, but at that moment, it felt like I had just won the lottery. So, naturally, I decided to run full speed down the hallway to tell my mom. Big mistake. Halfway down the hall, my socked foot glided effortlessly across the floor, too effortlessly. Before I could even react, my legs flew out from under me, and I slid forward like a baseball player diving into home plate. And then, pain. At first, I thought I had just banged my foot. But then I noticed something off. I looked down and saw a huge piece of wood sticking out of my foot. Not just a little splinter, not just a small sliver. A full 6-inch long wooden spike had impaled my foot. I froze. My brain refused to process what had just happened. And then, I screamed. My dad rushed in, saw the wooden dagger lodged in my foot, and immediately scooped me up and threw me in the car. I was crying. He was panicking. And my mom? She was trying to figure out how in the world a piece of our floor had just tried to assassinate me. At the ER, it took 2 hours for the doctors to figure out how to pull it out. Eventually, they decided to go with the yank it out with brute force method, which, spoiler alert, hurt like hell. The best part? That stupid splinter left a scar across the ball of my foot. A permanent reminder that Sizzler was not worth the pain. But some injuries don't come from sharp floors. They come from sharp teeth. And sometimes, the bite is worse than the bark. Story number 8. The birthday camel attack. Narrated by Sophia. Birthdays are supposed to be fun, right? Cake, gifts, maybe even a trip to the zoo. Well, let me tell you, my 7th birthday was unforgettable, but for all the wrong reasons. It started out great. My parents took me to a local petting zoo where I could feed the animals. I was beyond excited. I had just finished giving some pellets to a few goats and was heading toward the biggest animal in the enclosure, a camel. Now, at 7 years old, I thought camels were harmless, goofy-looking creatures. So, when I saw it chewing lazily and staring at me with those big, dumb eyes, I figured it would be fun to feed it. I held out my hand. The camel leaned forward. And then, chaos. Instead of gently taking the food, this beast lunged forward and wrapped its massive mouth around my entire arm. I screamed. My whole arm was inside its mouth. Before I could even process what was happening, it bit down. Hard. A sickening crack echoed through the enclosure. Pain exploded up my arm. My dad yanked me back, pulling me away from the camel's iron grip, but the damage was done. I was crying, people were freaking out, and my arm felt like it was on fire. My dad scooped me up and rushed me to the ER. That's when the doctor gave us the bad news. My arm was broken and my shoulder was partially dislocated. On my birthday, because of a camel, I spent the rest of the day in a sling and a cast, sitting at home with an untouched birthday cake, silently fuming. To this day, I hate camels. But not all injuries come from wild animals. Sometimes, they happen because of our own reckless curiosity. Story number 9. The treadmill that took my skin. Narrated by Pandora. I've made a lot of dumb decisions in my life, but this one still haunts me. I was 10 years old and hanging out at my friend Doopy's house. She had a treadmill, and to our 10-year-old brains, it wasn't just exercise equipment. It was a challenge. At first, we just walked on it like normal. Then we jogged. Then, because we were idiots, we cranked it up to the highest speed. The thing about old treadmills, they take a while to speed up. So when I hopped on, it started off slow. I was feeling pretty confident, until suddenly, it lurched forward at full speed. I tried to keep up. My legs burned as I sprinted, the belt whipping beneath me. I was panting, barely holding on, but I refused to give up. Then my foot slipped. I lurched forward and slammed face first onto the belt. Instinctively, I grabbed onto the handlebars, refusing to let go. Big mistake. The treadmill didn't stop. Instead, the belt kept moving, dragging my knees and feet along with it. I felt fire. A burning, searing pain as the rough surface shredded my skin like a human cheese grater. I screamed. By the time Doopy's dad, who was literally in the shower, ran out, I was bleeding everywhere, my legs covered in raw, exposed flesh. He yanked the power cord and screamed, "What the hell is going on?" I was shaking, barely processing the pain, just staring at my torn-up knees and feet. I spent the next few weeks wrapped in bandages, walking like a mummy. To this day, I still have scars on my knees, a permanent reminder that treadmills are not toys. Looking back, childhood wasn't just about fun and games. It was also about lessons learned the hard way. From busted knees to broken bones, these stories prove that sometimes our greatest teachers were our own reckless decisions. But now, it's your turn to what's the worst injury you ever had as a kid? Did you learn your lesson? Or did you go back and do it again? Tell us your story in the comments below. And hey, if you love wild, real-life stories like these, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on another Reddit True Vault adventure. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.